So after the election this past spring, we asked him. We said, he said this is just an extension of the political battlefield in Leslie County, and the only reason they got me was because the Democrats saw that here I was an emerging strong Republican with inviting this prominent Republican into the county and kind of flaunting the republicanism of his county to the nation.
Well, that won't bear scrutiny. Ready to go?
Yeah.
No, I think Judge Muncie is wrong about that. He got caught because the Carter administration directed the FBI to get out into the country and start investigating this terrible sea of political corruption that is destroying democracy in America. They got him. They got the judge in Prairie County. They've sent 2 or 3 sheriffs to the penitentiary, and they have captured the bag of people in Jackson County in the school system. They set up and caught Senator Harrison Williams of New Jersey, who was a Democrat, and most of the congressmen who were caught in the abscam were Democrats. No, his argument won't hold water. There is a swarm of FBI agents operating in East Kentucky now, investigating county after county, and I think they're hitting pay dirt in all of them. And I think it's the best thing that's happened in East Kentucky in my lifetime. I applaud the FBI. I applaud Carter for sending them there. I hope the Reagan administration will keep them there. The more crooks you can indict and send to the penitentiary, the more likely you are to clean up your political process. And we need to investigate everybody from justices of the peace up to the governors. Look at Ray Blanton of Tennessee. He went to the penitentiary. He was governor of the state. Maryland has sent it, the feds, as they say, have sent governors of Maryland, Democrat and Republican. Marvin Mandrell, I believe, was a Democrat. Spiro Agnew was a Republican. And Muncie just happened to be there in office at a bad time when the FBI decided it was time to look into the political corruption of Leslie County, Kentucky.
Let me back up on Muncie just a minute to ask you about George Wooten. He's beat Wooten in '73, I think it was.
Yes.
That was, I think it was very close in the primary. One of the things that he states was a coincidence, and clearly had nothing to do with Arab oil embargo, but he says that the coal production has increased by 400% since he was county judge, and he claims that that increase in coal production had nothing to do with him, but he clearly has the feeling that the reason that he has won continued is he's brought prosperity to the county. That and in this past primary, he based a lot of his political speeches on what was it like when George Wooten was your county judge, and what's it like now. Do you think that Muncie, in fact, was lucky on that side of it, and part of his base really has to do with that people associate Wooten with hard times and Muncie with good times?
Probably, but neither of them had a thing in the world to do with it, a bit more than I did. Giving Muncie credit for coal development in Leslie County would be like giving the county judge of Letcher County back in 1911 credit for the railroad being built up there to McRoberts at the head of the river. He had nothing to do with it. the truth is that the Arab oil embargo created a realization in this country that we had to find alternative energy sources. And when that happened, the people who owned Leslie County and who have owned it for a long time, the Ford Motor Company and the Kentucky River Coal Corporation and all the others, decided that we'll move in on the great coal reserves of Leslie County. I have seen one estimate that indicates that Leslie County, which is less than half as big as Pike County, has more coal in it than Pike County. So they're going for those coal reserves. And there's a lot of oil and gas in Leslie County. And if you had not had a county government, or if Idi Amin had been running the county, the industrial development would have come not because of the people, but in spite of them.
Do you think, though, that that's something that somebody in office might take advantage of and use
Oh yes.
as a means of getting elected or to convince the people? How is that sort of thing manipulated politically?
It's easy to do because people are simple, they're unsophisticated, they don't understand anything about economics, and they go by superficialities and vote on the basis of superficialities. And so it would be natural, they'd say, well, Muncie is here and we've got a big boom, so we'll vote for Muncie. But people with any real understanding of the facts of life would know that he didn't have anything to do with it.
Do you see any differences between Muncie and Wooten? I mean, are there significant differences between the two, or are they just...
Well, of course, I'm very fond of George Wooten and many other mountain politicians. Been my experience that the ins and the outs are almost exactly alike. It's a kind of game of musical chairs. They're all out of the same background. They want the office for the same basic reasons. And the school, no, you can change superintendents, and the schools don't get any better. You can change county judges, the roads get no better. You can change sheriffs, and the law enforcement gets no better. And for the same reason, the people don't want schools that are really good because their kids will have to leave television and go to work. They don't want law enforcement to be improved because they themselves would then have to pay the penalties for their own derelictions. They don't want to pay any higher taxes because they want to keep the money and spend it on cars, and so the things don't get any better.
I need to load up the magazine.
You know, okay. The real drawback to political progress in East Kentucky is the East Kentuckians. They're the people who beget and bring up the politicians. The politicians are a mirror of the people. One time Beckham Bates was nominated for sheriff, and his brother Jess and Beckham ran into me in the courthouse. I was doing some title research in the clerk's office, and they came in and asked me what I thought about Beckham's chance for winning the race. He was the Democratic nominee, and the Democrats had about a 4,000 vote majority, and of course he should have won. And I said, I think Beckham's going to lose. And Beckham said, why do you think that? And I said, well, now, Beckham, you've been going all over this county telling everybody you can get to listen that if you're elected, you're going to enforce the law without fear or favor. And you're going to arrest the law violators, and you're going to see that they're prosecuted. And I said, the people now believe you're telling the truth, and they won't vote for you. Nobody can get elected on a promise of strict law enforcement in Letcher County. And he lost to Maynard Hogg by a huge margin. I said, when you start talking strict law enforcement, everybody in the county begins to think that I'll have to slow down, I'll have to drive properly, I'll have to obey the law. My son will have to Imagine having your son arrested in Letcher County and not being able to go get it fixed. You don't want that. You want the other man's son to be punished. But what if he says, I'm going to make you obey the law? Better vote for somebody else. And it worked out exactly as I thought it would.
There's let's see, I've got about 2 or 3 other major questions. I mean, kind of parts of this that I'd like to get to. And one is has to do with let's see, I've got this one right here. I want to ask you some about, besides the cultural background of people's historical interest in the campaigning and the political process and the whole wide range of why would there be so many people running for jailer, let's say, where you've got 15 or 20 people that are running for this little office, and why, and I guess like how does, I want to get to is, how does politics work on the more kind of social and everyday life of people, that kind of question. And other, like what kind of prestige people have, and like besides the historical, on the actual everyday, why are people so interested? And other thing I want to ask you about some is, do you think that is the coal industry, it sounded like when we were talking about the coal development that it was that kind of, it's independent from the political process somewhat, but surely that isn't totally true.
Well, it's so big and so all pervasive that every politician who has any hope of staying in office will immediately bow to the coal, oil, and gas people, because
so
yes, that's it.
Okay, well that's the one thing I wanted to ask you besides the just the general let's see if there's anything else in my notes here. And
we've had people spend as much as $200,000 to get elected to the legislature. They couldn't possibly raise that kind of money if they didn't get it from coal. That's what Earl Clements raised in 1947 for his race for governor's office. They're spending as much now in a Senate race in the mountains as he used to spend for a governor's race in the whole state. And you can't raise that kind of money without the help of coal. And it's money well spent for them, because they get it back in tax advantages, and they get it back in such things as lax law enforcement. What would happen in Kentucky, for example, if you had a governor elected who got there and called up the state police and said, you get into the mountains and stop every truck that's overloaded or oversized? Couldn't live. Ned Breathitt sat there like a bump on a pickle and let all these big overloaded, oversized trucks come in. And after they got there, there's no way to get rid of them, because if you enforce the law, you bankrupt everybody up there.
Do you remember when Leslie, that's his name, Potter, what's his name, Donna Potter's father, that he was Judge Pro Tem under Black.
Lexi Potter.
Lexi, that's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, you remember when he called that meeting of the
yes, and said don't round it up too high. Yes, exactly. Well, Governor Brown summed it all up when he went to the dedication of the Peabody Coal Company's office building. He said, when Peabody calls, the governor comes. That's all there is to it. A character like, what's his name? A man named Malemazov is head of one of the companies who runs Peabody. And you just don't say no to people like that. The governor did manage to persuade Arm and Hammer of Occidental Petroleum to send his pictures here to the university to be seen. Hammer refuses to send them into the coal fields, but he might change his mind on that if the people up there would ask, and if the people in West Kentucky. But when Brown asked him, and Phyllis asked him, he has to keep those things air conditioned, just exactly the right temperature and so on. So he agreed to send them here, which is a major change. It's the only time in history that a coal magnate has ever done that. See, I think, Herbie, that when people are very, very, very locally oriented, that they get a lot of prestige out of an office that people who are not locally oriented would see as trivial. For example, a person who takes a wide viewpoint of the world would laugh at being JP. But if you think Leslie County is the heart and center of the universe and everything else is just superfluous, then being JP is an important office. Same's true of jailer. See, this whole system in England became so corrupt that in 1880 they abolished the whole rank.